I always believed blood made you family. I was wrong. I was so incredibly wrong. Because the girl I loved like a daughter, the girl I rescued from a broken home, the girl who whispered the word mom into my shoulder when the lights were out, she wasn't just growing up, she was harvesting me. She didn't just steal my money, she stole my history. She stole my name. By the time I realized what my niece, Simone, had done, I was a ghost in my own life. I no longer existed on paper. Before we dive into the wreckage, I want to ask you something. Look at the person sitting in the room with you right now. Do you really know them? At what point does love become a blindfold? Have you ever raised someone, poured your soul into them only to realize you were feeding a predator? Drop a yes or no in the comments and tell me what is the ultimate betrayal. I'm reading every single one because today's story is the reason you should never ignore your gut. This is Echoes of Trust and Betrayal, and this is the Identity Harvest. I never planned to raise a child. In my 20s, I was a creature of ironclad habits and solitary ambitions. My life was measured in double shifts at the firm and the rhythmic scratching of a pen as I balanced my ledger every Saturday night. I was focused on survival, dreaming about someday owning a small house with a porch and a swing. Nothing fancy, just peace. I wanted a life that was quiet, a life that didn't resemble the chaos of the world I had fought so hard to leave behind. I was the stable one, the sister who did everything right, the one who kept her head down and her bank account up. Then came the phone call at 2:14 a.m. The ring of a phone in the dead of night doesn't just wake you, it warns you. It carries a frequency of disaster. I picked up, my heart already hammering against my ribs. It was my sister, Beverly. Her voice was a jagged mess of static and sobbing, punctuated by the sharp, desperate breath of someone who had reached the end of her rope. "He's gone," she screamed. "The rent is past due. Elena, the landlord is coming tomorrow morning. He says if I'm not out, he's calling the cops. And you know what they'll do. They'll see the state of this place. They'll take her. I can't let them take her to a stranger, Elena, please." I didn't ask her which boyfriend it was this time. I didn't check my 3-year plan. I threw on a coat, grabbed my keys, and drove 3 hours into the belly of a thunderstorm. The highway was a blur of gray water and lashing wind. My windshield wipers fought a losing battle. Thump, 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 echoing the frantic, terrified pace of my mind. I was doing the math on my savings, wondering how a child's shoes and school supplies would fit into my color-coded spreadsheets. When I arrived at the apartment complex, the air tasted like damp concrete and exhaust. I climbed the stairs to the 3rd floor, past doors that leaked the sounds of television static and domestic warfare. When I stepped into Beverly's unit, the silence was what struck me first. It wasn't the silence of peace. It was the heavy, airless silence of a home that had finally stopped breathing. There was no furniture left in the main room, just a few cardboard boxes and a floor littered with cigarette butts. And there, in the corner of the room, sitting on a mattress that was stained with things a child should never have to recognize, was a 6-year-old girl, Simone. She was tiny, so thin that her collarbones looked like fragile wings under her skin. Her hair was matted into a single agonizing knot at the base of her skull. She sat in the dark, her hands folded in her lap, her eyes wide and terrifyingly calm. They weren't the eyes of a child, they were the eyes of a weary traveler who had seen too much of the road. I knelt on that filthy carpet, ignoring the grime that seeped into my clothes. "Simone?" I whispered. She didn't flinch, she just looked at me. "Are you my auntie?" "Yes," I said. My heart didn't just break, it hardened into a shield. She walked toward me and wrapped her thin, cold arms around my knee. She squeezed so hard I could feel the tremors in her fingers. "Can I go with you? Is your house quiet?" I looked at Beverly. My sister wouldn't meet my eyes. She was frantically stuffing her own clothes into a duffel bag, looking for her lighter, looking for an exit, looking for anything but the reality of the child she was discarding.
"Yes, baby," I said, lifting her up. She weighed almost nothing, like a handful of dry leaves. "My house is very quiet, and from now on, it's your house too." I walked out of that apartment and never looked back. As I strapped her into the seat of my car, she watched the building disappear through the rain-streaked glass. She didn't wave goodbye. She just closed her eyes and fell into a sleep so deep it looked like a coma. I thought I was the hero of that story. I had no way of knowing that by bringing her into my quiet world, I was inviting in the only person who could ever truly destroy it.
The first year was a lesson in the slow, agonizing work of unlearning trauma. Simone didn't know how to exist in a space where no one was screaming. For months, she wouldn't sleep in the bed I bought her, a beautiful oak frame with the softest organic cotton sheets. I would wake up at 2 a.m. to find her curled up on the hardwood floor in the corner of her room, her back pressed firmly against the wall, her eyes fixed on the door. She was a sentry in a 6-year-old's body, guarding the only peace she had ever known. "You're safe here," I would tell her, sitting on the floor beside her until my legs went numb. "The door is locked. I'm right outside." I began to notice the small, strange habits she brought from that dark apartment. I found rotted fruit and half-eaten sandwiches tucked into the toes of her winter boots or hidden behind the books on her shelf. She was hoarding. She lived in a constant state of not enough, terrified that the pantry would be empty when she woke up. I had to teach her, slowly and patiently, that the food wasn't going anywhere, that I wasn't going anywhere. I enrolled her in school. I bought her clothes that were soft and clean, clothes that smelled like the lavender detergent I used to keep the world feeling fresh. I learned how to braid hair, my fingers becoming nimble as I worked through the knots she arrived with, both in her hair and in her soul. I helped with homework until the kitchen table was a battlefield of erased pencil marks and crumpled paper. I held her through nightmares that made her scream for a mother who wasn't there. I sat in the front row at every dance recital, filming her like she was the only star in the galaxy. I cheered at spelling bees until my throat was raw. I never adopted her legally, not because I didn't want to. I begged Beverly for the papers, but Beverly always had a reason to wait. "Don't worry, I'll handle the paperwork," she'd say. She never did. She kept that legal leash on me, even as she disappeared for months at a time with men I never met. But I didn't care about a piece of paper. In my heart, Simone was mine. She called me auntie in public to keep the peace, but at home, when the tea was steeping and the world was locked outside, she called me mom. I never corrected her. I needed that word. It was the oxygen that kept me going through the long hours and the financial stress. I was building a world for her, a fortress of stability. But as she grew, I noticed she was a student of that fortress. She watched how I logged into my bank accounts. She watched where I kept my social security card. She watched the way I signed my name at the bottom of her permission slips. I thought she was admiring me. I didn't realize she was studying the blueprint of my life, waiting for the day she could step into it and push me out. The house always felt different on Sunday afternoons. It was the one time of the week when the gears of my analytical brain slowed down just enough to let the silence in. The air usually smelled of lavender detergent and the faint, sweet scent of the tea I kept steeping on the counter. It was supposed to be our sanctuary, the quiet life I had promised the 6-year-old girl on the stained mattress. We were in the laundry room, a small space that I had painted a soft, warm cream color to make it feel less like a chore room and more like a part of our home. The dryer was humming, a rhythmic, mechanical purr that usually acted as the heartbeat of our weekend. Simone was 10 now. She was growing taller, her limbs losing that bird-like fragility and gaining a grace that made my heart ache with pride. We were folding towels. It was a simple task, a repetitive motion that we usually did in a comfortable, easy silence. But that day, the air felt thick, heavy, like the atmosphere right before a summer storm breaks. Out of nowhere, Simone's hands froze. She was holding one of my large white bath towels halfway through a fold. She didn't look up at me. She just stared at the fabric, her knuckles turning slightly white as she gripped the edges. Why didn't my real mom want me?
The question didn't just drop, it crashed. It shattered the hum of the dryer and the peace of the afternoon. I felt my own hands go cold. I stopped mid-fold, my breath hitching in my throat. I looked at her, really looked at her. She was staring at a loose thread on the towel, her jaw set in a way that reminded me so much of myself when I was trying not to cry. I knew this moment was coming. I had rehearsed it in my head 1,000 times during my late-night shifts at the firm. But no amount of mental preparation makes you ready for a 10-year-old to ask why she was discarded. I dropped the towel I was holding and knelt down on the rug beside her. I needed to be on her level. I needed her to see my eyes, even if I was terrified of what she would find there. "Simone, look at me," I said softly. She slowly turned her head. Her eyes weren't wet yet, but they were hollow. That same hollow look she had when she was 6. It broke my heart to see it return. "She loves you, Simone," I said, my voice steady despite the trembling in my chest. But sometimes adults are broken. They're broken in ways that have nothing to do with their children. My sister, Beverly, she has holes in her soul that she tried to fill with all the wrong things. She didn't leave because of you. She left because she didn't know how to stay. She didn't know how to be the person you deserved. I reached out and tucked a stray hair behind her ear. Her skin was warm, a sharp contrast to the cold dread I felt. I continued, choosing every word as if I were walking across a frozen lake. It wasn't that she didn't want you. It was that she couldn't see you through her own pain. And that is her tragedy, Simone, not yours. Simone didn't blink. She processed my words with a clinical intensity that I found both impressive and unsettling. She was always so observant, always calculating the truth behind the tone of my voice. But you stayed. You weren't broken. I swallowed hard. I was plenty broken, but I glued myself together with work and routine and the desperate need to be her anchor. I said, I chose to be here because the moment I saw you, I knew you were the most important thing in my world. I didn't just take you in, Simone. I picked you. Every single day, I pick you. A single tear finally escaped and tracked down her cheek. She didn't sob. She just leaned forward, resting her forehead against my shoulder. I wrapped my arms around her, pulling her close, feeling the small, rhythmic thud of her heart against mine. "I'm glad you picked me," she whispered into my shirt. That sentence, those 5 words, they became my oxygen. They were the justification for every double shift, every sacrificed vacation, every dollar saved, and every potential relationship I had walked away from because it might disrupt her peace. I felt a surge of love so powerful, it felt like a physical weight. I would do anything for this girl. I would give her my life if she asked for it. I didn't realize that she was already starting to take it. As we sat there in the laundry room floor, Simone's eyes shifted. Over my shoulder, she was looking at the desk in the hallway where I kept my blue folder, the archival file that held our lives. Even in that moment of supposed emotional bonding, her mind was working. She wasn't just feeling, she was recording. She noticed where I kept the spare key to the fireproof box. She noticed the way I checked the mail and immediately sorted the bills into paid and pending. She noticed the passwords I used for the home computer, which were always variations of her birthday or the day I brought her home. I thought I was teaching her to be a strong, organized woman. I thought I was showing her how to build a fortress of her own. I didn't realize I was handing a master thief the blueprints to my vault while I was still standing inside it. That afternoon, after the laundry was folded and put away, she sat at the kitchen table and watched me pay the electric bill. She sat so close her shoulder brushed mine. "Can I see how you do that, Mom?" she asked, her voice sweet and curious. "Of course, sweetie," I said, opening the laptop. "You're going to need to know how to manage your own life someday. It's all about the numbers. Numbers don't lie. If you take care of your credit and your name, the world will open doors for you." "Your name is my name, right?" she asked, tilting her head. "In our hearts, yes. To the rest of the world, we're a team. As long as we have each other, we have everything." She smiled back, a bright, beautiful smile that reached her eyes. It was the smile of a daughter who loved her mother. But looking back, I can see the calculation behind the warmth. She wasn't just happy I picked her, she was happy she had found a life worth stealing. By the time the sun went down that Sunday, the lie was set. I believed she was my savior. She believed she was my opportunity. And the oxygen that kept me breathing was the very thing she was preparing to suffocate me with.
High school is usually the time when children pull away, when they demand their own space and find their own voices. But with my niece, it was the opposite. She didn't pull away, she leaned in. She became a shadow that followed the contours of my life so closely that eventually I couldn't tell where I ended and she began. By the time she was 15, the transformation was staggering. She had grown into a striking young woman, tall and poised, with a way of standing that commanded the air in the room. She was a star, captain of the debate team, honor roll student, a leader in the student council. I was blinded by my pride that I would tell anyone who listened at work, she's gonna be something big, she's gonna run the world. I didn't know she was starting with my world. It began with the observation phase. I'd be in my home office on a Tuesday night, the green lamp casting a long, warm glow over the desk. I'd be sorting through the blue accordion folder, my sanctuary of paperwork. I kept everything there. The deed to our small house, my tax returns, my social security card, and the birth certificate I'd fought so hard to keep safe. I'd feel that familiar prickle on the back of my neck. I'd turn around, and there she would be, leaning against the doorframe, a textbook tucked under her arm. "You're so meticulous, Mom," she'd say, her voice as smooth as polished stone. "I love the way you organize things. It makes me feel safe." "Organization is survival, sweetie," I'd tell her, beckoning her over. "If you control the paperwork, you control the narrative. That's how the world works." I thought I was giving her life lessons. I thought I was mentoring a future CEO. I didn't realize I was a victim handing the blueprints of my vault to the person who was planning to empty it. She began to ask questions that felt like curiosity, but were actually extractions. "What was the name of that first street you lived on, Mom? The one where you said you felt the most free? What was your first pet's name again? Was it the golden retriever or the tabby cat? How do you remember all your passwords? Do you use a pattern?" I gave her the answers. I gave her the keys to our security questions. I gave her the passwords to our home computer because I trusted her more than I trusted myself. I even let her help me file the taxes one year. I sat her next to me, showing her how to look at the W-2s, how to enter the social security numbers, how to track the refunds. "It's like a puzzle," she whispered, her eyes reflecting the blue light of the monitor. "If you have all the pieces, you can be whoever you want to be." I laughed. "Well, as long as you're being yourself, you'll be fine." She didn't laugh back. She just nodded, her eyes fixed on my social security number on the screen. Then the mimicking started. It wasn't just the way she talked or the way she walked. One Saturday morning, I walked past her bedroom door. It was cracked open just an inch. I saw her sitting at her vanity, but she wasn't looking at herself in the mirror. She was looking at a scrap of paper. She was holding my favorite fountain pen, the one I used for everything official. On a notebook page, she had written my name 100 times, my signature. The way I looped the first letter, the way I trailed off the last one. She was practicing. Her hand was moving with a clinical, repetitive rhythm. Elena, Elena, Elena. I should have felt a chill. I should have asked her why, but my analytical brain failed me. I told myself she just admired my handwriting. I told myself she was just a girl who wanted to be like the woman who saved her. I walked away feeling a warm glow of affection, while in that room, my niece was perfecting the art of being me on paper. By her junior year, she started helping with the mail. "I'll get it, I'm already by the door." She would bring me the bills, already sorted, already opened to save me time. I was working 60 hours a week to pay for her debate trips and her college prep courses. I was exhausted. I was grateful for the help. I didn't notice that the bank statements for accounts I hadn't used in months were starting to disappear.
I didn't notice that the fraud alert letters from credit card companies never made it to my hands. She was clearing the brush, making sure the path was open. She was learning my credit score, a 780, a number I had spent 15 years building like a cathedral. She knew my debt-to-income ratio. She knew the balance of my savings. She wasn't just my daughter. She was a biological recording device, capturing every detail of the woman she was preparing to replace. She was building a mask, and the mask was my face. One night, we were watching a movie on the couch. She leaned her head on my shoulder, just like she did when she was 10. "I'm so lucky. I don't know who I'd be without you." I squeezed her hand. "You'd be fine, Simone. You're strong." "No," she said, and for a second, her voice lost its warmth. "Without you, I'm nothing, but with you, I can have everything." I thought she was being sentimental. I thought she was expressing her gratitude. But looking back at the cold, hard reality of what happened next, I realized she wasn't talking about our bond. She was talking about my credit line. She was talking about my history. She was talking about the fact that as long as I existed, she had a host to feed on. She had moved from the observation phase to the rehearsal phase, and the show was about to begin.
The piece we had built wasn't a solid structure. It was a bubble, and every bubble eventually meets a needle. For us, that needle was my sister, Beverly. It was a Tuesday in July. The heat was a physical weight, the kind of mid-Atlantic humidity that makes the air feel like wet wool. I was in the kitchen, slicing peaches for a cobbler, listening to the rhythmic thud-thud of a basketball in the neighbor's driveway. Then I heard a car door slam, a heavy, metallic sound that didn't belong to any of our neighbors. I looked out the window. My heart didn't just drop, it sank into my stomach like lead. There, standing at the end of my driveway, was a ghost. Beverly hadn't changed, yet she was unrecognizable. She looked like a blurred version of the woman I'd seen years ago, her skin like parchment, her eyes darting around with the frantic energy of a cornered animal. She was carrying a suitcase that looked like it had been dragged through every bus station from here to the coast. When I opened the door, the smell hit me before she even spoke. It was the smell of that dark apartment from years ago, stale cigarettes, cheap perfume, and the sharp, acidic tang of a life lived in a state of emergency. "I'm ready to be a mother again," she said. No hello, no how have you been, just a demand, whispered through cracked lips. The house went dead silent. Behind me, I heard a sharp intake of breath. I turned to see Simone standing at the top of the stairs. She didn't look like a debate captain. She didn't look like an honor roll student. She looked like that 6-year-old on the stained mattress, her face turning a ghastly shade of gray. Without a word, she spun around, retreated into her bedroom, and I heard the heavy click of the deadbolt. That sound, that mechanical rejection, was the opening bell. Beverly stayed for 2 weeks. I couldn't throw her out. She was blood, and she was desperate. But having her in the house was like having a slow-leak gas line. Every conversation was a risk. She would sit in my kitchen at 3 a.m., raiding the pantry, leaving sticky rings from coffee mugs on the wood I worked so hard to polish. "You've made her soft," Beverly hissed at me one night, her eyes illuminated by the orange glow of her cigarette. "You've wrapped her in this fake life. You think you're better than me? You think because you have a retirement account and a matching set of towels that you're her mother?" "I'm the one who stayed, Beverly," I said, my voice low and vibrating with a decade of suppressed rage. "I'm the one who washed the grime out of her hair. I'm the one who held her through the nightmares you gave her." "You're a glorified babysitter," she spat, "and she knows it. She knows where she came from. You can dress a crow in white feathers, but it's still a crow." But while I was fighting Beverly for the soul of the child I'd raised, I didn't notice what Simone was doing. Every time Beverly and I argued about money, about the $5,000 she wanted for her business opportunity, about the debt she owed to people she wouldn't name, Simone was listening. She was watching me open the safe to check our emergency cash. She was watching me pull out the blue folder to verify our documents because I didn't trust Beverly not to steal them. Simone was seeing the cracks in my armor. She was seeing that for all my analytical brain and my structured life, I was vulnerable to family.
I was a mark for the people I loved. The final explosion happened on a Sunday. Beverly had reached her limit. She knew I wasn't giving her the money. She stood in the hallway, screaming at the top of her lungs, calling me a thief who had stolen her daughter's affection. She looked up at Simone's closed door and shrieked, "Don't forget who your real mother is. She's just a copy. I'm the original." When Beverly finally left, slamming the door so hard a picture frame in the hallway shattered, the silence that followed was terrifying. I walked up the stairs and knocked on Simone's door. "She's gone, baby. She's gone." The door opened slowly. Simone stood there, her face a mask of cold, hard resolve. There were no tears, no trembling. She looked past me at the empty hallway. "I'm never going to be like her," she whispered. "I know you won't," I said, reaching out to hold her. "And I'm never going to be like you," she added, pulling back just an inch. "I'm never going to let anyone have that much power over me. I'm never going to be the one who waits for a phone call." At the time, I thought she was talking about strength. I thought she was rejecting the victimhood of her mother and the burden of my caretaking. I didn't realize she was rejecting the concept of being the original. She saw that I was the one with the assets, but I was also the one with the liability. She saw that as long as she was my niece, she was at the mercy of my sister's whims. But if she was me, if she had my credit, my history, my name, she would be untouchable. That night, after I thought she was asleep, I sat at my desk and opened the blue folder to make sure everything was there. The social security cards, the birth certificates, everything looked in order. I didn't notice that the light on the home computer was still on. I didn't notice that the history tab had been cleared. I didn't notice that while I was comforting her, she had been photographing every page of my life with her phone. Beverly had brought the darkness back into the house, but Simone was the one who was learning how to use it to hide. She had seen the original and the copy, and she had decided that she didn't want to be either. She wanted to be the one who owned the narrative. She had graduated from the observation phase. Beverly's return had been the catalyst. The identity harvest wasn't a plan anymore. It was an active operation.
Senior year of high school is supposed to be a season of beginnings, but for us, it was the start of an ending I couldn't see coming. The house felt lighter after Beverly left, or at least that's the lie I told myself. I thought we had survived the storm. I thought we were back to the safety of our routines. The Saturday morning pancakes, the late-night study sessions, the quiet hum of a life well-ordered. Then came the college applications. This is where the identity harvest shifted from a rehearsal to a surgical strike. To get Simone into the universities she deserved, we needed more than just her grades. We needed her history. We needed the paperwork. And because I had never legally adopted her, we were in a gray zone. We needed Beverly's information to fill out the FAFSA, the financial aid forms that would determine Simone's future. I reached out to Beverly, expecting another fight, but she was suddenly, terrifyingly cooperative. She sent over a thick envelope via certified mail, birth certificates, social security cards, medical records from a dozen different clinics in a dozen different cities. "I want her to have a better life than I had," Beverly told me over the phone, her voice sounding thin and defeated. I fell for it. I believed in the redemption arc. I laid all the documents out on the dining room table under the warm glow of the chandelier. I brought Simone over, and together we began the process of building her digital future. "Look, Mom," Simone said, her voice soft as she looked at my own social security card sitting next to hers. "Our numbers are so close, just a few digits different at the end." "That's because we're from the same place, sweetie," I said, patting her hand. "But your number is clean. It's a blank slate. Mine is a history. Every bill I've ever paid, every loan I've ever taken out, it's all tied to that number." I didn't notice the way her eyes lingered at my cart. I didn't notice the way she pulled her phone out to check a notification, her thumb hovering over the camera app. For the next 3 months, we were a team of accountants. We spent hours hunched over the laptop. I gave her everything. I gave her my mother's maiden name for the security questions. I gave her the name of my first pet. I gave her the exact dates of my employment history so we could verify her household income. I was handing her the keys to my vault, and I was doing it with a smile on my face because I thought I was teaching her to fly. "Can I handle the login for the financial aid portal, Mom? You're so tired after work. I want to take this off your plate." My analytical brain should have screamed, but my mother's heart was exhausted. I was working 60 hours a week to make sure her college fund was topped off. I was drowning in the logistics of her success. "That would be a huge help, honey," I said. I gave her my primary email password. I gave her my bank login so she could monitor the tuition deposits. I gave her my life, and I went to bed early that night, feeling a profound sense of peace. I thought I had finally given her the stability she needed to leave the nest. What I had actually done was give her a skeleton key. In the quiet of the night, while I slept the heavy, oblivious sleep of the overworked, Simone was busy. She wasn't just filling out scholarship forms, she was opening doors. She used Beverly's cooperation as a smokescreen. She told me the financial aid office needed more verification. She asked for my driver's license to scan it into the portal. She asked for my tax returns from 3 years ago. Every piece of paper I handed her was another brick she removed from the wall of my identity. The first theft was small, a student credit card that she didn't actually use for school. She opened it using my name as a co-signer, but she didn't use my address. She used a P.O. box she had set up across town. She used my good credit, that 780 score I was so proud of, to get a $5,000 limit. She didn't spend it on clothes or makeup, not yet. She spent it on the architecture of the lie. She bought a high-end scanner. She bought software to edit PDFs. She bought the tools of a professional ghost. By the time the graduation ceremony arrived, the girl walking across that stage in the cap and gown wasn't just my niece. She was a fully formed digital double. She had my credit, she had my history, she had my trust. As she hugged me afterwards, the scent of her expensive perfume, bought with a card I didn't know existed, filled my nose. "I'm going to make you proud, Mom," she whispered into my ear. "I'm going to make sure you never have to worry about me again." I believed her. I cried tears of pure, unadulterated joy. I thought she was promising to be successful. I didn't realize she was promising to replace me so entirely that I wouldn't have anything to worry about. The trap was set, the door was open, and all she had to do now was walk through it and lock it behind her.
The house felt cavernous after she left. It is a strange, hollow physics, the way the absence of one person can change the very acoustics of a home. For a decade, my life had been soundtracked by the low hum of Simone's music through her bedroom door, the rhythmic, rapid-fire tapping of her fingers on a keyboard, and the occasional sharp burst of laughter that reminded me why I was working 60 hours a week. Now, there was only the sound of the refrigerator's compressor kicking on and the relentless mechanical ticking of the clock in the hallway. She had moved into her dorm 2 hours away in August. I remember the drive vividly, the car packed to the glass with new bedding that smelled of plastic packaging, a high-end laptop that cost me 3 weeks of overtime, and enough supplies to stock a small bunker. I was a nervous wreck, my hands gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. But Simone, she was calm, terrifyingly calm. "Don't worry, Mom," she had said, leaning over to pat my hand as we crossed the city limits. "I have everything under control. You taught me how to handle the world, remember?" I drove home that night alone, crying into a lukewarm cup of gas station coffee, feeling that bittersweet ache of a mother whose job is finally done. I thought the quiet life I had always dreamed of was finally returning. I didn't know the quiet was actually the silence of a void. The first fracture appeared 3 months into her freshman year. It was a Tuesday in late October. The leaves had turned into brittle orange skeletons, and the air had that first metallic bite of winter. I walked in from a 12-hour shift at the firm, my neck stiff and my eyes burning from staring at logistics spreadsheets. I went to the ceramic bowl by the door, the place where my habits required me to drop my keys and sort the mail immediately. I liked order. I liked knowing where things were. There was a thick, white envelope at the bottom of the stack. It was from a bank I didn't recognize, a credit institution I had never stepped foot in. I sat at the kitchen table,
the light from the overhead lamp casting long, shaky shadows across the linoleum. I opened it carefully with a silver letter opener, expecting a pre-approved credit offer. But it wasn't an offer. It was a statement. Past due notice, $4,821. I stared at my name printed at the top in cold sans serif type. It was my name. It was my social security number, but the billing address listed was a P.O. box in Westwood, a neighborhood I hadn't visited in years. My heart didn't just beat, it thudded, a heavy, dull sound in the quiet kitchen. I pulled my laptop over, my fingers trembling as I searched for the address of that P.O. box. My stomach did a slow, sickening roll when the map loaded. That P.O. box was located in a 24-hour shipping center less than 2 miles from Simone's dorm. My analytical brain immediately went into damage control. "It's a coincidence," I whispered to the empty room. "Identity thieves target college areas because they're transient. It's a clerical error." I called the bank. I sat on hold for 45 minutes, listening to a tinny, distorted version of Greensleeves, while my pulse did a slow, heavy drum roll in my ears. When the representative finally picked up, her voice was clinical, devoid of any empathy. "Yes, ma'am, I see the account here. It was opened online 6 months ago. All the security protocols were met. The identity was verified." "I didn't open this," I said, my voice sounding like it belonged to a stranger in a distant room. "I live 2 hours away from Westwood. I have no business in that part of the state." "The application was verified with a scanned copy of your state-issued driver's license, ma'am," the representative continued, oblivious to the bomb she was dropping in my kitchen. "And the secondary contact email on the account is in, let me see, it's in S.Wilson at the university domain." The air in the kitchen suddenly felt like ice water. S. Wilson. Simone. I hung up the phone. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't ask for a supervisor. I just sat there in the dark, the white paper of the bill glowing like a bone under the kitchen light. I called Simone. I didn't want the truth. I wanted a shield. I needed her to tell me that she had been hacked. I needed her to tell me that someone at the university had stolen her login and found the digital copies of my ID we had used for her financial aid forms. I was begging the universe for any explanation that wasn't the one staring me in the face. "Mom, what's wrong? Why are you calling so late?" she said when she finally answered on the 4th ring. In the background, I could hear the muffled, rhythmic thump of a bass line, a party, or perhaps just the loud, chaotic life of a freshman. "Simone, I just got a letter from a bank about a credit card. It was opened in my name, but the billing address is a P.O. box in Westwood, right near your campus. And Simone, your university email is listed as the secondary contact." There was a pause. Not a shocked silence, but a long, heavy suspension of time. I could hear her breathing. It was slow, even. It was the breathing of a student preparing for a high-stakes debate. That's insane," she said, her voice dropping into a smooth, comforting cadence. "Mom, I told you the university Wi-Fi is a joke. Everyone's getting phished lately. Someone must have gotten into my student portal and found those scans we made for the FAFSA. Remember, we scanned your license and your tax returns together on the home printer." I felt a wave of relief so violent it made my knees weak. I slumped into the kitchen chair, tears of gratitude stinging my eyes. Of course, the digital scans, the architecture of trust we had built together. It had been compromised by a stranger. It wasn't her. It could never be her. "You're right," I breathed, wiping my face with the back of my hand. "I'll file a fraud claim. I'll put a freeze on my credit. I'll call the campus police tomorrow morning." "Wait, don't do that yet," she said. Her voice sharpened just a fraction. "I mean, the school's IT department is already overwhelmed with a data breach scandal. If you call the cops now, they might freeze my student account as part of the investigation. I could lose my scholarship disbursements while they verify everything. Let me talk to the registrar tomorrow morning. I'll handle the school side of it, Mom. You just handle the bank. We'll fix it together, like always." "You're so responsible," I whispered, my heart overflowing with love for the girl I had raised. "Thank you, honey. I don't know what I'd do without you." "I love you too, Mom. Go to sleep. You sound exhausted. I'll call you tomorrow with an update." I hung up, feeling like I had dodged a bullet. I spent the next 4 hours on the computer, changing passwords, calling credit bureaus, and setting up alerts. I was the protector again. I was the stable one fixing the world for the person I loved most. I didn't notice that when I called the credit bureau, the automated system told me my primary phone number on file had been changed 3 weeks prior. I didn't notice that my blue folder in the office, the one I kept in the third drawer, felt a little too thin, missing the original birth certificate Beverly had sent. And most of all, I didn't notice that Simone never once asked me how much the bill was for. She didn't need to ask. She knew exactly how much was left on the limit, and she knew exactly how much time she had left before the next error arrived. That night, I slept the sleep of the righteous. I thought I had caught the ghost in the machine. I didn't realize the ghost was the girl I had tucked into bed for 12 years. And she wasn't just in the machine, she was the one who wrote the code. The fracture was there, the first crack in the cathedral of my life. And while I was busy trying to patch it with logic, the foundation was already turning to ash.
For the next 2 months, I lived in a state of hypervigilance that I mistook for control. I had frozen my credit, changed my passwords, and filed the fraud reports. Every time I spoke to my niece, she was my rock. She would give me updates on the university investigation, telling me stories of other students who had been hit by the same phantom hackers. She was so convincing, so empathetic, that I felt guilty for ever having that split-second doubt in my kitchen. I thought I was safe. I thought the analytical brain had won. Then came the Monday morning that changed everything. I was at the firm, sitting in my glass-walled office. The sun was pale and weak, filtering through the blinds in long, thin stripes. I was deep into a logistics audit, the familiar comfort of spreadsheets acting as my only anchor. There was a knock on my door, sharp, official, and unexpected. It was my boss, Marcus, and a woman from the Human Resources Department named Sarah. Sarah wasn't smiling. She was holding a manila folder, and she was looking at me with a mixture of pity and professional distance. "Do you have a moment?" Marcus asked. His voice was unusually stiff, lacking the usual morning warmth we shared over coffee. "Of course," I said, setting my pen down. "Is everything okay with the quarterly report?" They sat down, and Sarah opened the folder. She slid a piece of paper across the desk toward me. It was a legal document, a writ of garnishment. "We received this from the county clerk's office this morning," Sarah said softly. "It's a court order to withhold 25% of your disposable earnings, starting next pay period." I stared at the paper. My name was at the top. The creditor listed was a high-interest lending company I had never heard of. The debt was for $12,000. This is a mistake," I stammered, my heart beginning a frantic, uneven rhythm against my ribs. "I've been dealing with identity theft. I've already filed the reports. I don't owe this money. I haven't even bought a new car in 5 years." "The problem is," Marcus said, leaning forward and lowering his voice as if someone might be listening through the glass. "This isn't just a credit card bill. This is a judgment. According to the court records, you were served papers for a lawsuit 4 months ago. You failed to appear in court. Because you didn't show up, they won by default. The judge signed off on the garnishment last Friday." The room started to tilt. The rows of files on my shelf seemed to lean in toward me. 4 months ago? I was never served. I never saw any papers. I check my mail every single day at the door. I have a system. "They were served to a residence in Westwood," Sarah added, her eyes fixed on the folder. "The process server's notes say the person who accepted the papers identified themselves as your daughter. She signed for them." The air left the room. I felt as if I were underwater, the sounds of the office becoming muffled and distant. Westwood, the town near the university, the P.O. box location. "I don't have a daughter,"
I whispered, though the words felt like they were being strangled in my throat. I have a niece, but I raised her. She's at school there. I looked at the signature on the service of process form. It was a messy scrawl, but the name was clear. My name, written in my handwriting. She hadn't just used my credit, she had used my physical existence to evade the law. She had intercepted the legal warnings, signed for the lawsuits, and let the judgments pile up, knowing that by the time my analytical brain caught on, the damage would be terminal. The firm has a strict policy about financial stability for employees in the logistics and finance departments. We handle millions of dollars. If your personal finances are this compromised, we have to conduct a full internal audit of your accounts here. Until that's finished, we have to place you on administrative leave. I was being hollowed out. My career, the one thing I had built with my own two hands, the one thing that was supposed to be my fortress, was being dismantled by a girl who used to hide crackers in her shoes. I left the office in a daze. I didn't even grab my coat. I walked out into the cold November air, my breath coming in short, jagged gasps. I sat in my car and did what I always did. I called her. "Simone," I said, the moment she picked up. My voice was a ghost of itself. "The firm just got a wage garnishment. They said someone in Westwood signed for legal papers in my name. They said it was my daughter." There was no pause this time, no S. Wilson cadence. "I am so sorry," she sobbed. The sound was so violent that it stopped my heart. I didn't know what to do. Beverly found me. She came to the dorm. She said she was in trouble with some bad people and she needed me to sign some things or they would hurt her. She said she was using your name to protect the family. I was so scared. I thought if you told me, you'd be mad at her and it would start the fighting all over again. She was using the Beverly shield. She was throwing her biological mother under the bus to save herself, knowing that my one weakness was my history of protecting them both from chaos. "I used my name for a $12,000 loan?" I asked, my grip tightening on the steering wheel until I thought the plastic might snap. "She said it was for a debt relief program," she wailed. "I didn't read the papers. I just wanted her to leave. She's been stalking me on campus. I've been so stressed I can't even study. I didn't want to worry you." I wanted to believe her. Every fiber of my being screamed at me to believe the girl I had rescued from the stained mattress. But then, my analytical brain did something it had never done before. It looked at the timing. Beverly didn't know my social security number. Beverly didn't have access to my tax returns. Beverly didn't have the S. Wilson email account. "Simone," I said, my voice turning cold. "Where is Beverly now?" I don't know. She left last week. She said she was going to the coast." "I'm coming to see you, right now. We're going to the police together. We're going to file a report against Beverly. We're going to clear my name." "No," she shouted. "You can't. If you file a report, they'll arrest her. She's still my mom. You can't do that to me." She had dropped the mom title for me. She was calling me you now. The mask hadn't just slipped, it had dissolved. "I'm on my way," and I hung up. I drove the 2 hours to the university in a trance of pure, cold adrenaline. I didn't think about the garnishment. I didn't think about the audit. I only thought about the blue folder. I thought about the girl who traced my signature at the kitchen table while I watched her with a smile. When I arrived at her dorm, the air was still and smelled of floor wax and stale popcorn. Her roommate was sitting on her bed, looking startled. She told me Simone wasn't there. She had checked out 3 hours ago. She had taken her laptop, her bedding, and her important documents. I stood in the middle of that empty dorm room, the scent of her expensive perfume still hanging in the air like a taunt. I looked down at the desk. There, sitting right in the center of the wood, was a single piece of paper. It was a copy of my own birth certificate, but someone had used a professional scanner and editing software to change the date of birth. It now showed a date that made me 10 years younger. She wasn't just stealing my money, she was perfecting the transition. She was preparing to be me in a different city with a different history, leaving the original version of me to drown in a sea of debt and lawsuits I didn't even know existed. The harvest was over, the storage bins were full, and I was left standing in the field watching the winter settle in.
The drive back from the university was the longest 2 hours of my life. The darkness of the highway seemed to press in against the windows, a suffocating weight that made the dashboard lights look like flickering ghosts. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. My analytical brain was firing at 1,000 miles per hour, trying to calculate the damage, trying to find a way to partition the disaster. I still have the house, I told myself. I still have my primary savings account. I still have my name. I pulled into my driveway at nearly 1 a.m. The house sat there, dark and silent, a silhouette of the sanctuary I had worked 20 years to build. I walked to the front door, my hand shaking as I reached for my keychain. I slid the key into the deadbolt. It wouldn't turn. I frowned, thinking I had the wrong key. I tried again, applying more pressure. Nothing. It felt as if the tumblers had been seized. I looked at the lock. It was new. The brass was shiny, unscratched, not the weathered lock I had touched every day for a decade. She had changed the locks. The realization hit me like a physical blow. I stepped back, looking up at the dark windows of my own home. I was locked out of my own life. I grabbed my phone, intending to call the police, but as I tapped the screen, a message popped up. Emergency calls only, SIM not provisioned. She hadn't just changed the locks. She had ported my phone number. She had called the service provider, verified my identity using the blue folder documents, and transferred my entire digital existence to a new device in her pocket. I was a ghost. I ran to my car and drove to the nearest 24-hour ATM. I needed to see the numbers. Numbers don't lie. I slid my card into the machine, my heart hammering against my ribs. I typed in my PIN, the same 4 digits I had used since I opened the account. Incorrect PIN, 2 attempts remaining. I tried again, slower this time. My fingers were ice cold. Incorrect PIN, card retained. Please contact your branch. The machine swallowed the plastic with a dry, mechanical click. I stood there, staring at the screen as it reset to the welcome page. I had no phone. I had no access to my money. I had no way to enter my home. I spent the rest of the night in my car, parked in a grocery store lot, watching the sun crawl over the horizon with a slow, agonizing indifference. As soon as the bank opened at 9 a.m., I was at the door. I looked like a madwoman, my hair unwashed, my eyes red-blushed, the same clothes I had worn to the office the day before. I walked up to the teller, a young woman who looked like she was barely out of college. "I need to access my account," I said, my voice cracking. "My card was swallowed. My phone is down. I think I've been a victim of identity theft." She took my name and looked at the screen. Her brow furrowed. "I see the account, but it was closed yesterday afternoon, ma'am." "Closed? I didn't close it." "The account holder came into our Westwood branch in person, ma'am. She had a power of attorney and a notarized letter stating that she was liquidating the assets for a property purchase. She had your driver's license, your birth certificate, and she correctly answered all the security questions." "I am the account holder," I shouted, slamming my hand on the marble counter. "Look at me. I am the woman in that picture." The teller looked at my license on the screen and then looked at me. I saw the doubt in her eyes. The woman in the picture was polished, professional, and 10 years younger, thanks to the edited birth certificate Simone had perfected. I was a disheveled mess, shaking with rage and terror. "I'm going to have to call my manager," she whispered. 10 minutes later, I was sitting in a small, windowless office with a man in a cheap suit and a security guard standing by the door. "We've reviewed the transaction. The person who closed the account didn't just have your ID. She had your digital signature. She had the original deed to your house. She even had the login credentials for your investment portfolio. She moved $42,000 into a crypto wallet that we can't track." "She's my niece," I whispered, the words feeling like ash in my mouth. "I raised her. I gave her everything." "According to the paperwork she filed with us," the manager said, looking at me with a cold, professional pity, "she is the primary beneficiary of your estate, and you have been declared mentally unfit due to a recurring neurological issue. She had a medical report signed by a doctor in Westwood." The doctor.
the architecture of the trust. She hadn't just stolen my money, she had created a legal paper trail that made me a ward of her will. She had used the information from my own medical history, the small things I had told her about my anxiety and my stress, and magnified them into a diagnosis that stripped me of my agency. I walked out of that bank with nothing but the clothes on my back and a half tank of gas in a car that was likely also being reported as stolen. I went to the police station. I sat for 4 hours waiting for a detective. When he finally saw me, he looked at the blue folder I had managed to recreate from memory. "It's a civil matter," he said, rubbing his eyes. "You gave her the passwords. You gave her the documents. You raised her as your daughter. Without a clear trail of forced entry or physical theft, it's your word against a stack of notarized documents. And right now, the documents say you don't exist." I walked back to my car. I looked at my reflection in the rearview mirror. I didn't recognize the woman looking back. She looked old. She looked broken. She had harvested the best years of my life. She had taken my stability, my career, my home, and my savings. But as I sat there, the analytical brain finally stopped trying to fix the past and started looking at the future. She thought she had erased me. She thought she had turned me into a ghost. But she forgot one thing. Ghosts don't have anything left to lose. And ghosts can follow you anywhere. I put the car in gear. I didn't have a home to go to, but I knew where she was going. I knew the cadence of her lies. I knew the blueprint she was using because I was the one who drew it. The harvest was over, but the winter was just beginning, and I was going to make sure she felt every bit of the cold.
There's a specific kind of clarity that comes when you have lost everything. When the house is gone, the money is gone, and the name on your birth certificate has been weaponized against you. The world stops being a place of emotion and starts being a map of data points. I was no longer a mother. I was no longer an aunt. I was a logistics coordinator with 20 years of experience in tracking assets, and I was hunting a stolen life. I spent the first 3 nights in my car. I parked in the back of a hospital parking lot where a woman sitting alone in a sedan at 4 a.m. doesn't look like a vagrant. She looks like a grieving relative. I used the hospital's public Wi-Fi on my old work laptop, the one piece of equipment she hadn't managed to brick because it was encrypted by the firm. I opened a blank spreadsheet. I titled it The Harvest Recovery. "Think," I whispered to the dark interior of the car, the air smelling of stale coffee and cold upholstery. "She's smart, but she's arrogant. She thinks I'm a broken woman crying in a police station. She thinks she's the only one who knows how to navigate the system." I started with the crypto wallet. The bank manager said she had moved $42,000. You can't just spend crypto at a grocery store. You have to off-ramp it. You have to turn it back into real money. To do that, you need a bank account. And to open a bank account in a new city, you need a physical address. I didn't look for her name. I knew she'd dropped it. I looked for my name. I spent 18 hours a day in a public library, hunched over a computer in the back corner where the light was dim. I used my knowledge of the firm's proprietary tracking software to look at utility hookups in 3 different states. I looked for my social security number being pinged for credit checks at apartment complexes. On the 4th day, the screen flickered. A hit. A credit inquiry had been made 48 hours ago in Savannah, Georgia. An application for a luxury high-rise apartment. The applicant? My name. The income? My previous salary at the logistics firm, verified by a forged letter of employment that looked identical to the ones I used to sign for my staff. She wasn't just hiding, she was stepping into a larger version of the life I had built. She was using my 780 credit score to buy the porch and the swing I had only ever dreamed of. I didn't call the police. I knew what they would say. It's a civil matter. We need a warrant. We need a lead. I didn't have time for a warrant.
I had a half tank of gas and a credit card I had hid in the lining of my suitcase years ago for an emergency I hoped would never come. I drove south. The drive was 18 hours of pure, cold calculation. I didn't listen to the radio. I listened to the sound of the tires on the asphalt, a rhythmic, punishing beat. I thought about the blue folder. I thought about the girl who sat on the floor and let me braid her hair while she memorized the loops of my signature. I arrived in Savannah as the sun was beginning to burn through the morning mist. The city was beautiful. Willow trees draped in Spanish moss, cobblestone streets, the smell of salt and old money. It was exactly the kind of place she would choose. It was a stage. I found the high-rise. It was a glass and steel needle in the heart of the historic district. I parked across the street and waited. I waited for 6 hours. I watched the professionals in their suits. I watched the tourists. And then, at 2:15 p.m., the glass doors swung open. There she was. She looked magnificent. She was wearing a tailored trench coat that must have cost $1,000, my money. Her hair was perfectly styled, swinging against her shoulders with every confident step. She was carrying a leather briefcase, the same brand I used to carry. She wasn't just my niece anymore. She was the woman I had spent 20 years trying to become. She walked to a black SUV parked at the curb. A valet opened the door for her. She tipped him with a crisp bill and a smile, the same warm, practiced smile she used to give me after a dance recital. I felt a surge of rage so powerful I thought my heart would stop. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run across the street and tear that coat off her back. I wanted to tell the valet, the tourists, and the whole city that the woman in the SUV was a thief built out of paper and lies. But I stayed in the car because I noticed something. As she climbed into the driver's seat, she pulled out a familiar blue accordion folder. She set it on the passenger seat like it was a sacred text. She was still using it. She was still relying on the physical copies of my life to keep her charade alive. She thought the identity harvest was a one-way street. She thought once she had the folder, she had the power. She didn't realize that in my 20 years of logistics, I had learned the most important rule of the game. A shipment is never yours until it's signed for, and I hadn't signed off on my life yet. I followed her. I kept 2 cars back, weaving through the moss-draped streets, my eyes fixed on her taillights. She drove to a high-end furniture gallery. She spent an hour inside, picking out pieces for a home that didn't belong to her. As I watched her through the gallery window, laughing with the salesperson, I realized what I had to do. I didn't need the police. I didn't need a lawyer. I needed to do to her exactly what she had done to me. I needed to make her a ghost. I waited for her to leave the gallery. I waited for her to return to the high-rise and hand her keys to the valet. I waited until the lights in her corner unit on the 12th floor flickered on. Then, I went to a 24-hour business center. I sat down at a computer. I didn't look for bank accounts this time. I looked for the architecture of the lie. I looked for the medical records she had forged. I looked for the power of attorney documents. I began to draft my own letters. I used the same professional tone, the same clinical precision she had used to erase me. I wrote to the bank. I wrote to the apartment complex. I wrote to the local authorities. But I didn't sign my name. I signed Beverly's name. I was going to pull the Beverly shield right out from under her. I was going to use the shadow of her biological mother to turn her new life into a crime scene. I was going to make it look like a fight between 2 thieves. The hunter was no longer in the woods. I was in the tall grass, and I could see the light in her window. She was pouring a glass of wine, celebrating her victory. She didn't know that the original was standing in the dark, and the original was about to take everything back with interest.
The lobby of the high-rise smelled like expensive lilies and filtered air. It was a sterile, wealthy scent that made my skin crawl. I didn't sneak in through the basement or pick a lock. I used the analytical brain. I walked up to the concierge with a confidence I didn't feel, my posture rigid, my voice an exact imitation of the authority she had stolen from me. "I'm here to see my daughter," I said, sliding a folder across the marble counter. "She's in 1204. She's expecting me. We have some final papers to sign." I didn't show him my ID. She had already made sure my ID looked like a forgery. I showed him a photo of us from her graduation, the two of us smiling, her head on my shoulder, the proof of love. He didn't even blink. He buzzed the elevator. The ride to the 12th floor was silent, save for the faint, pressurized hiss of the cables. My heart wasn't racing anymore. It was cold. I felt like a surgeon about to perform a necessary, brutal amputation. When the doors opened, the hallway was lined with thick, plush carpet that swallowed the sound of my footsteps. I stood in front of door 1204. I didn't knock like a stranger. I knocked with the rhythmic 3-beat pattern I used to use when I was waking her up for school. Tap, tap, tap. I heard the locks turn, the heavy thud of the deadbolt, the slide of the chain, the very sounds that had kept me out of my own house 2 weeks ago. The door opened. She was standing there in a silk robe, a glass of dark red wine in her hand. The light from the floor-to-ceiling windows behind her framed her like a saint in a cathedral. For a split second, her face was soft, expecting a delivery. Then she saw me. The wine glass didn't shatter. She was too controlled for that. Her hand just tightened around the stem until her knuckles turned a ghostly white. "You're late," she said. Her voice wasn't scared. It was flat, hollow. "I had to walk," I replied, stepping past her into the apartment. "You took the car, remember? And the bank accounts, and the phone." I walked into the center of the room. It was beautiful. Minimalist furniture, original art on the walls, and there, on a mahogany side table, sat the blue accordion folder. My life, sitting next to a bowl of decorative stones. I turned to look at her. She had closed the door and was leaning against it, watching me with the same clinical intensity she used when we studied for her debate tournaments. "How did you find me?" she asked, taking a slow, deliberate sip of wine. "Logistics, honey," I said, gesturing to the room. "You can change a name, but you can't change a supply chain. You needed a high-speed data line. You needed a specific brand of furniture. You needed my credit score. There are only so many places in this zip code that accept that kind of profile." She laughed. It was a dry, brittle sound. I should have known, didn't I? The stable one, the woman who never misses a detail. "Why, Simone?" The question felt heavy, like a stone in my mouth. "I gave you everything. I worked double shifts for 10 years, so you never had to sit on a stained mattress again. I loved you like my own." She set the wine glass down and walked towards me, her silk robe trailing on the hardwood, her eyes suddenly burning with a decade of resentment. "That's the problem," she hissed. "You loved me like I was a project. You saved me. Every time you looked at me, you didn't see me. You saw a girl you rescued. You kept me in that quiet life like a bird in a cage, waiting for me to be the perfect version of you. So I took the shortcut. I realized I didn't need to be your project anymore. I could just be you." "You're not me," I said. "Oh, but I am," she smiled. "On paper, in the banks, in the eyes of the law, I am the woman who built this. You're just the woman who's in my way. You're drowning in debt I created, and I'm about to close a deal on a penthouse in Atlanta. By the time the police figure out which one of us is the real one, I'll be gone." I looked at her, really looked at her. I didn't see the girl I raised. I saw a void. "You're right," I said, softly, stepping back towards the blue folder. "You're on paper as me, which is why I sent a very specific email this morning. Do you remember the S. Wilson account? The one you used to open the Westwood P.O. box? The one you used to coordinate the business opportunities with Beverly's creditors?" The smirk on her face faltered. "I didn't just find your location, Simone.
I found your outgoing mail server. I found the S. Wilson logs. You used that email for everything. You used it to forge the medical reports that called me mentally unfit. You used it to authorize the crypto transfers. You thought it was a burner, but you linked it to the university's student portal for the tuition payments. You left a digital fingerprint on every single theft. I opened my coat and pulled out a stack of printed logs. I didn't call the police on you, I called the IRS. I sent them the S. Wilson logs showing exactly where the money went. And I called the people Beverly owes money to, the ones you've been paying off with my savings to keep them quiet. I told them exactly where my name was being used. I told them exactly where the woman who signed those checks is living. I stepped closer until I could see the panic rising in her throat. "Fix it," she whispered, her voice cracking. "Mom, please fix it. Tell them it was a mistake." "I can't," I said, walking towards the door. "The analytical brain already sent the data, and numbers don't lie." I opened the door and walked out. I didn't look back. As the elevator doors closed, I heard the sound of heavy pounding on her door and the shouting of my name, the name she had stolen, and the name that was now her prison.
She truly believed she was the original now. She had convinced herself that my years of labor were just a rough draft for her masterpiece. She walked through that high-rise in Savannah with my name on her lips, clutching the blue folder she'd stolen from my office. She thought that because she had the physical documents, my birth certificate, my old social security card, my deeds, she held my soul in her hands. But she forgot the most basic rule of logistics. A document is just a copy of a record, and the records don't live in a blue folder. They live in the stone basements of the buildings where they were born. I didn't try to hack her. I didn't waste time guessing passwords. I stopped treating this as a digital fight and started treating it like a physical reclamation. While she was busy flaunting those stolen papers in Savannah, I went to the source. I didn't need the blue folder. I went to the hospital where I was born. I went to the county clerk's office where my first marriage license was filed 30 years ago. I went to the federal building and requested a manual identity verification based on physical biological markers, my fingerprints, and my dental records. I proved that the woman holding the blue folder in Savannah was holding a stolen shell. By providing my primary source records, the ones that exist in ink and stone, untouched by the internet, the state issued a scorched earth fraud freeze. It didn't just lock my credit, it invalidated every digital signature linked to my name for the last 12 months. It rendered every document in that blue folder stolen and void. In one afternoon, I turned her life into a crime scene. But I wasn't just going after the daughter. I knew Beverly was the ghost in the machine. She was the one who had whispered the family secrets into Simone's ear so she could pass the security questions. Beverly was the silent partner, hiding in a motel in Westwood, waiting for her cut of the harvest. I didn't call the police on them. I called the Internal Revenue Service's Criminal Investigation Division. I reported a coordinated conspiracy. I provided the specific motel address and the wire transfer records, showing that the money stolen from my savings was being funneled to Beverly to pay off her old debts. The backlash was a symphony of collapse. Simone was at a high-end furniture gallery trying to finalize a $5,000 purchase for her new life. Because the identity was voided, the transaction didn't just decline, it triggered a federal fraud alert. The police arrived while she was still arguing that she was the one in charge. When she reached into her bag for that blue folder, thinking it would save her, the officers saw the void alert on their screens. She was arrested in the middle of the showroom, the very papers she stole now serving as the primary evidence of her theft. And Beverly, her karma was even colder. I knew she had been using my name to file fraudulent insurance claims on the side, her own little harvest. When the federal agents knocked on that motel door in Westwood, she had nowhere to run. Because Simone had tried so hard to become me, she had inadvertently left all of Beverly's side scams completely exposed to the light. They didn't just lose the money, they lost each other. In the interrogation rooms, the architecture of trust turned into a bloodbath.
Simone, desperate to save her future, turned state evidence against her own mother, claiming she had been coerced into the scheme. Beverly, realizing her daughter was throwing her to the wolves, produced her own hidden stash of messages, proving Simone was the one who had planned it all from her dorm room. They tore each other apart in a race to see who could betray the other first. I didn't attend the hearings. I didn't need to see their faces. I watched from a distance as the S. Wilson email server was dismantled by federal investigators. Every lie they had told about me being mentally unfit was rebranded as evidence of aggravated fraud. I used the legal restitution protocols to reclaim every cent. The money was transferred into a new, private account that has no digital footprint. I sold my house and every stick of furniture they had ever touched. I didn't want the memories. I wanted the clean slate. I live in a small, cedar-shingled house on the coast now. I have a new name, legally secured through a protection program. My ledger is written in ink, kept in a safe that requires a physical key. I sit on my porch and watch the tide come in. I am 52 years old. I am the only original that matters, because I am the only one who survived the fire. Simone is in a federal facility, and Beverly is back in the state system she spent her life trying to outrun. They are trapped in a cycle of blame, while I am finally, truly free. I reach out and push off the porch, the swing creaking with a steady, honest sound. I don't have a digital shadow anymore. I have a life, and for the first time, the only person who knows how to access it is me.
The blue folder is gone. The passwords have been reset. But in the quiet hours of the night, I still find myself checking the locks. Not because I'm afraid of her, but because I finally understand that the most dangerous person in your life isn't the stranger in the shadows. It's the one you invited into the light. It took me 20 years to build a life, and only 6 months for a girl with a laptop and a smile to tear it down. I got my money back, I got my freedom back, but I will never get back the version of myself that believed in family over security. Because the harvest is always coming. The only question is, who's holding the scythe? If this story kept you on the edge of your seat, or if it made you want to go double-check your own security settings, do me a favor, hit that like button. It helps the analytical brain of the algorithm find more people who need to hear this warning. And if you want to be here for the next deep dive into the shadows of trust and betrayal, make sure you subscribe and turn on those notifications. We're just getting started, and you don't want to be the one left in the dark when the next story drops. I want to hear from you in the comments. Have you ever felt the architecture of trust start to crack in your own life? Or is there someone in your circle you've started to look at just a little bit differently? I'm reading every one of your stories. Stay safe, stay analytical, and for God's sakes, change your passwords. I'll see you in the next one.